Uranus. The planet of change. So Uranus, right? The planet of change. In this little section of the video, we're going to be talking about how you actually use the planet of change, because everyone has it in their chart, but what's pertinent to you is the sign you have it placed in, as well as the house. But we're going to get into the second part later. So this is all about how you go about using this energy, right? So for you, this sign is placed on the cusp of Scorpio and Sagittarius. Eventually, we're going to go down and explain all the planets correlated to these signs, but we have to get through a little more things first. So, in this particular installment, we're going to be talking about how you use this energy. Now, how we understand this energy is personality traits, how you interact with certain things in the external world, as well as how you use this energy yourself, which is much broader than actual personality traits. Now, in terms of talking about the actual planetary energy, this can get a tad complicated because it's literally change itself. So once you get into more advanced astrology, you may understand that Uranus and Pluto have the best view of our realm because they are more or less transient beings. Now, I know they're all really transient beings because they literally have transits, but these have a lot of energy around change itself. So if you understand change, that's not a fixed position. And when you don't have a fixed position, you can truly experience the realm of all possibilities. So when we talk about view in a spiritual sense, this is literally your field of awareness. So if your field of awareness is change and the power to change, one's obviously a little faster than the other, but you basically have the best view in this realm. Now, with that being said, let's move on over and we'll get into how these signs affect this individual energy. So, now to get actually into the energies of your sign, we have to talk about Scorpio and Sagittarius. Now, why it's both is because you are on the cusp. When you are a cusp sign, this is a lot like living on a border town. You're definitely on one side of the border, but lines drawn in the sand are artificial and energy is forever. Energy can be created, it can be transmuted, it can be all types of things. I know you may have some different thoughts on how energy can be created, but you know, science versus spirituality, you pick which came from what. Now, in terms of how this cusp works, is a cusp is a lot like culture. So if you live on one side, you may definitely be a Uranus and Scorpio person or a Uranus and Sagittarius person, but you catch on to the energy of what came before. Now, you specifically are a Uranus and Sagittarius person, barely, which is why it's kind of like a 60-40 split between Sagittarius and Scorpio. One's optimistic, one's a little aggressive, one should push them to that point, but when you put them together, they're a tad delusional. So we'll get into that, but let's talk about the actual technical understanding of these signs, and then we'll get into that. Now, with the Scorpio side, Scorpio is the fixed water sign, which means that it's fixated on its own way of feeling and adding emotion to things. So if you go around in life and you see some motherfucker standing over there being like, dang, that person's an ice cube, you can't get through to them whatsoever, and you need more than one single icebreaker exercise to actually get people more comfortable with each other. You know, this basically explains Scorpio. It's fixed water. Fixed water is ice. That person is an ice cube, point blank, period. So this energy is born from the 8th house, right? Now, once we get into the houses, you'll understand this a little bit better, but the 8th house is the space of the unknown, the dark realm, what's behind closed doors, things done in the occult. You know, there's a reason why people wear clothes outside, because that 8th house realm is supposed to be covered. You're not supposed to see that till you're behind closed doors, because it's called your privates for a reason. Now, with that being said, this is where the Scorpio constellation was born from. Obviously, from our perspective video, we know that this is not actually how astrology is calculated, but it's good to know because the 8th house is literally the sign that we're talking about, right? But we just call it Scorpio. Whole story, bring it out in the perspective video. But long story short, this is where you get the understanding of how this sign actually grew up. Now, the planets correlated to the sign can give you a better understanding of the archetype. So Scorpio, well, we're going to work our way up from the bottom in terms of planets it likes and planets it does not. Well, it hates the moon, so it falls there. It'd rather be asleep than do anything but experience this planet's energy. it is away in Venus, the planet of love, appreciation, values, and how you relate to others. It's away in Earth, structure, growth, stability, how you plant the seed, and the long process that it happens. And then it is at home in one of its favorite planets, Mars, which it's actually the nighttime of, or the internal version of. So Mars. And then it is also co-ruled by Pluto, which is where it gets kind of its conniving power and control side to it, which is that planet with farthest out planet actually in this ecliptic. And then it is exalted in this planet, Uranus. It loves change. Uranus, your motherfucking anus. So this planet being exalted in change is kind of why Scorpios love to be around a good fire sign. Because when they are around a fire sign, they can actually melt their ice and easily transition out of what they're actually experiencing. Now, on this side, we have the more Sagittarian side, which is a lot less planets, but we got to get through the house first. Sagittarius is the 9th house sign, and where the Sagittarius constellation was actually born out of. So once again, houses are exactly like the house you grew up in. This is the energy that you were basically cultivated, you were groomed in. So this is the same thing for that sign. When you get higher in dimensions, it's literally the same shit. Where do you think we got the concept from? It's just more. So with that being said, Sagittarius is born from the 9th house, the thighs, the biggest mover of blood in our body. This is where we get different outlooks. This is a very optimistic space. It likes to have a lot of different outlooks on how to do things, but it doesn't necessarily like picking one. So with that being said, this is where the optimistic sign came from. Now, Sagittarius loves Jupiter, the planet of expansion through experience, and it hates Mercury. It doesn't like coming up with the details on the actual plan of explaining this energy. So these two signs put together basically are the cusp you lie on, which I like to call the cusp of delusion, because it combines optimism and feeling so deeply, putting them together, which is kind of a train wreck if you don't understand balance within yourself. So with this being on the planet of change, you can kind of understand how all the traits I'm about to lay out may fit for you. So let's get to that. So with you having the cusp of delusion in the actual sign of Uranus, this can be a very interesting situation to say the least. So you have to bear in mind that this planet is one of the closest of the outer planets. However, it is still an outer planet. So what this means is that you don't actually experience this energy as often as you may think of a Saturn and below planet. This is not exactly one of your regular tools. This is not one of the astrological energies that dictate who you are as an individual. This is just one of your far out tools that you have to experience every once in a while because it's change. Although you experience a lot of small little changes throughout your life, when big ones come, this is actually when the planet Uranus shows up. So with this being in the cusp of delusion, this is why I say that it takes a long time for you to understand balance, right? There's balance with this energy specifically. Because anytime a change comes, you may have frozen just based off the pure options of what you could have actually experienced. You may have, gone too far one way and stayed super optimistic in how you could have actually experienced this change. And then when you look at the potential of how things could change in the external world, you kind of look at it like, maybe it could go this way. I'm optimistic it could go this way, this way, this way, this way, this way. And then the thing is like, you kind of just hone in on one little aspect of the great view that you picked, and you just hone in on that and have this weird, like, I don't know how to explain it. It's just weird, fixation on being optimistic, yet you're putting so much energy into one way of experiencing that optimism, which is not always what you do with this energy, but it's what you may have done in the past when learning this balance. Now, one key thing that I like to mention about this placement is you actually have it in retrograde. Now, you may have not actually lived through this planetary energy more than once, because it takes about 7 years for Uranus to move through one sign. So you probably haven't exactly lived through this energy more than once. You may, but with this being in retrograde, which means the planet's spinning backwards, meaning that you're experiencing the past ways of this planetary energy, you're not exactly going to have to deal with this confusion and balance. I'm just literally explaining this so that you can understand how you may have gone about it in a small little bit. But with it being in retrograde, this means that when your spirit was vibrating up in the spirit realm, planning out your life and planning out this incarnation, you were like, I like how I dealt with change in this time. So I'm going to take this skill and literally implement it now. So with that in mind, when you feel that first feeling of you want something to change, don't get too caught up in different ways of looking at it and being optimistic of the potential of how things could be. You don't need that all the time. It's good sometimes when you actually have the space to do it, but when you get that red flag or that moment to go where you really need to handle this energy right now and change it, don't sit and freeze, because you know that you're well capable of just handling it right then and there. I know that all this talk about Uranus and the Cusp of Delusion can be pretty broad, but remember what I said in the beginning. Both of these planets have the best view in this realm because they have the widest awareness to experience all possibilities. By nature, this energy is broad. How you experience change can never be spoken in directs unless you have a direct experience of how you can go about doing this. But you know what I'm talking about. The cusp of this energy is so broad, so massive. You as an individual person have experienced on a grand level and on a very individual level at the same time, because like I said, you experience little changes all the time, and in that brief moment you can kind of isolate how you experience this individual planetary energy, and on a broad scale, when something big happens, you know exactly how to slap it into place. But let's move on over and talk about personality traits with the sign. So, as an individual with this placement, when someone really pisses you off, you don't exactly give them the time of day to keep going on. And if you do, you're basically gathering your evidence on how you can justify to yourself of setting that motherfucker straight and, giving them a straightening. So, with that being said, these people, they like to give them time, they like to let others talk, and they like to build their repertoire on how, why, and when they could really get to this person and change that. I know this is specifically for interpersonal conflict, but you may experience a lot of that, which is quite fun because you didn't really take that much time to learn that if you don't like something, you're going to change it. And this comes back to the whole retrograde statement of you probably picked this energy from a past life which you really liked, where you would exact your wrath on a person when the time was needed, and you don't really want to take the time in this lifetime to learn the balance of doing that because you're extrapolating all of the criteria, tools, and data on how to balance this energy from a past life which you felt was good enough for this incarnation. But that's on you to decide once you do your internal work and go through meditation and actually learn all these things. But let's get back to interpersonal and all the, how a person deals with this stuff. So the Sagittarius side of this cusp, that is the very optimistic energy, maybe I don't have to do this to this person. Maybe they'll learn on their own, that side of yourself. This is all about, this is basically just balancing out the Scorpio side, because Scorpio loves the sign of Uranus. As I mentioned in the beginning of this video, this is its highest exaltation space. This is where it loves to be. It loves to just change. It doesn't like to sit in its ice cube form. While you have the fiery, mutable fire sign of Sagittarius kind of holding it back in a way, which is weird because normally the fiery side helps melt the ice, which is kind of just the tool that you use to hold yourself back from, for lack of a better term, letting this sizzle in your spirit for too long, to the point that you get so angry that you begin to do too much when you want to exact your wrath on somebody in an individual stance. Now, this is good, it's bad, but people kind of fear this energy in a way. And you may be sort of aware of that if you kind of catch my drift. Because this is... it's literally Scorpio in Uranus. It's basically so aggressive, so fixated, so focused that you're just like, when you want to change somebody, you literally stare them down and set that straight. Like I said, giving them a straightening. Everybody needs it from time to time, don't get me wrong, but It's just a whole experience in itself. But outside of that, literally outside of that, when it comes to these people looking at the external world, these people never experience that feeling of, oh, I can't do anything about how the world is. Oh, I guess that's just how it's going to be. You don't do that, you know? These people, if they see something, they will say something. It's literally like that endless thing that plays on the audio in airports or any type of transportation authority. If they don't like something in the world, they don't feel that they don't have the tools to change it. They literally think, okay, I'm going to sit, I'm going to gather, I'm going to absorb all this information, all this experience until I feel like I am abundantly ready to do something about it. Because they know that if they want to change something in the world, especially with this Sagittarian energy, that it's going to take a lot of knowledge, a lot of visions, a lot of awareness, and you're going to have to build up that internal gumption to feel like you have the, pardon my French or whatever, cojones to do something. So these people don't fear their ability to change the world on their own. They just recognize the capacity of what they need to do it, which is why it may take a lot of time to get there, and especially why, for you specifically incarnating during this time, may have chosen your retrograde energies from a past life so that you would know the exact energy that you need to come with to do what you have to do in this realm so that you can move and leave with a clear conscience. So it may take a lot for you to get there. It may take a lot of energy for you to even convince yourself that you're ready to do it. But it never took that much energy to convince yourself that you could do it, will do it, and when you'll do it. But that's pretty much it for this energy so far. Stay tuned and remember that this placement is not complete until you have a understanding of the house placement within your own body. But we're going to get to that.